Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gaston Alonso, and I am the director of the Ethel R. Wolf Institute for the Humanities at Brooklyn College. And it is so wonderful to come together this morning as a community to welcome this year's Hess Scholar-in-Residence legal scholar, Professor Melissa Murray. Now, to start Hess Week 2025, it is my honor to introduce Brooklyn College President, Michelle J. Anderson.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Brooklyn College and this incredible tradition, I want to welcome everyone officially to Hess Week. The Hess Scholar-in-Residence series of events is always one of my favorite times in the academic year, and this week is no exception. Hess Week was born out of a generous endowment from the family of Robert L. Hess, the 6th president of Brooklyn College and a champion of the humanities. Today, we want to thank the Robert L. Hess Memorial Fund and the Hess family for their ongoing and generous support. The tradition of Hess Week has then been carried on throughout the years through the tireless efforts of the Wolf Institute for the Humanities, named after Professor and former Dean Ethel R. Wolf, who helped bring the Institute to life. Brooklyn College, as so many of you know, is known for its excellence in the humanities. We are proud of that. And as we particularly know now, the humanities undergird some of the core values of the academy, including critical thinking, freedom of inquiry, and the pursuit of truth, the importance of fact, reason and persuasion over bullying and force. Particularly as these values are under attack, we must come together, celebrate, and defend them. For nearly half a century, the Ethel R. Wolf Institute for the Humanities has thrived in its mission to engage in critical discussions on these core issues of broad public support. And today, of public import, today we have Professor Melissa Murray from the NYU School of Law to carry on the mission of the Wolf Institute. Professor Murray is no stranger to Brooklyn College. In the fall of 2023, she delivered the Konevsky Lecture here on campus. We thank the Samuel J. Konevsky Fund and the Konevsky family for their generous and ongoing support and for bringing Melissa first to this campus. Then last fall, Professor Murray joined former Hess Scholars-in-Residence, Barbara Smith, who is with us here today. Let us pause and clap for Barbara Smith. And Paul Ortiz for a conversation about the 2024 election. It turns out that Professor Murray is so brilliant, so engaging, and so beloved by our community here that she has become part of the Brooklyn College family. We claim her as our own, so instead of welcome back today, it's more like welcome home. In recognition of Professor Murray's extraordinary legal scholarship and contributions as a public intellectual this year, the Hess Week includes 3 events that are sponsored by the Frederick I Civil Liberties and Academic Freedom Lecture. Little story. Frederick I was a Brooklyn College English professor from 1930 through 1952. And during the height of the McCarthy period, Ewan was forced to resign his teaching position after refusing to testify or cooperate with a Senate Internal Security Committee investigation of communism in higher education. Speaking of academic freedom, during the same era, in 1950, when journalists of the Brooklyn College student newspaper, The Vanguard, had the temerity to criticize the then president, Harry Gideons, he closed the student newspaper, locked the doors of the office, suspended 5 student journalists, and put 50 other students on probation. And you can read some of the original documents related to this instance of repression of free speech in the academy in front of my office in Boylan Hall. Though Professor Ewan was forced to resign in 1952, his nephew established this annual fund on civil liberties and academic freedom. And we're proud to have the Hess Week as part of it this year. Thank you to the Frederick Ewan Fund for its generous support. Finally, let's just thank the director of the Ethel R. Wolf Institute for the Humanities, the great Professor Gaston Alonso. I also want to thank his whole team, including Kiana Benjamin, and the students and faculty on the Board of Advisors. And I'll now turn the podium back over to Gaston for additional welcoming of this official moment for Hess Week.
Thank you, President Anderson, and thank you to the provost, the vice presidents, the deans, the chairs, the directors who are here. Thank you to the faculty, the staff, the students, and the community members who have joined us today. Before I go on, I have two quick announcements. First, I want to let you know that a recording of this event will be available in the Wolves Institute YouTube channel. And second, if you're a student and you didn't sign in on the way in, please make sure you sign in on the way out. Now, my next honor is to introduce the Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Phil Napoli.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of the department's programs and centers of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. I'm honored to welcome Professor Murray to our college. In a 2024 Yale Law Journal Forum article, Professor Murray asks us to contemplate what does it mean for the court to do history. The question points us in three directions. The first direction is autobiographical. Before earning a law degree from Yale Law School, Professor Murray graduated from the University of Virginia with degrees in history and American studies. The second direction is historical. Professor Murray's question asks us to consider the complex history of and connections between the study of the law and the study of the humanities and social sciences. During the late 19th century, the professionalization of the study and practice of the law began a movement away from the humanities, away from philosophy and ethics, history and literature as a proper way to prepare oneself to become a lawyer. By the mid-20th century, as the courts began to be increasingly dependent on quantitative evidence to measure disparate treatment and other topics and issues, we saw an embrace of the social sciences as sources of guidance and evidence. Recently, we have seen a call to recenter a humanities lens in the law, with its concerns for ethics, interpretation, history, and power, and to questions of how we study and practice the law. This history asks us to consider what the court needs. What kind of education, training, background is needed when it seeks to do history? The third direction Professor Murray's question pushes us toward is toward interdisciplinarity. What does it mean for the court to do history asks us to consider a related question. What does it mean for those like me who are in history, and by extension for those in the humanities and social sciences in general, to do the law? How do we engage with the law in our studies, in our teaching, in our classrooms, in an effort to make sense of the world? Disciplinary and institutional boundaries have too often siloed us from each other. But there are reasons to transcend those boundaries, to come together and talk across those boundaries. At a time in which we are told that legal institutions and those engaged in the study and the practice of law are the last line of defense for democracy, these matters are urgently important. And so, we look forward to engaging in fruitful and important conversations with Professor Murray and the legal experts who are with us this week. Welcome to Brooklyn College. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Phil. So over the last 8 months, our planning committee has been worked with Melissa to craft events that are inspired by her scholarship, her advocacy, her work co-hosting Strict Scrutiny podcast, and her work as a public legal analyst. We are very, very proud of the program that we put together, and we consider it a gift from us to you. Now, throughout the week, we're going to center voices that will allow us to better understand the power of the law, the power of the courts as both defenders of rights and increasingly tools of those who seek to exercise power over others. During the week, we're going to do the work of higher education. We're going to broaden minds, and we're going to complicate the narratives that we all tell ourselves to make sense of this world. We invite you to join us for the ongoing conversation we'll be having the rest of this week during our panels, and then to join us on Thursday morning at 11 a.m. right here in the Tanger for Melissa Murray's Hess Memorial Lecture. We also invite you to enjoy the wonderful exhibition of archival materials related to Melissa that Kelly Karst put together at the library's entrance. And thank you, Kelly. Kelly's not here, but she's on the live stream. And I must also acknowledge Kelly's work in developing the library guides for Hess Week that provide the Brooklyn College community with free electronic access to Melissa's writings. We want Hess Week events to be important parts of students' education. And Kelly's work and the library support help us to accomplish that. Events like these are always the work of a team of dedicated people. And I always cry when I say thank you. But that's because I have a small team of really, really dedicated people who've made this happen. And I have to second President Adams' acknowledgement of the work of Tiana Benjamin, the Wolf Institute's administrator. Without Tiana, none of this would be possible. I also need to acknowledge the work of the Hess Selection Committee that chose Melissa Murray as our scholar, and the work of the Hess Planning Committee, who's been working the last months to make this all happen. Their names are in the program, but if you're here, can you please stand up so we can acknowledge you? And I'm looking at you. And some are a little shy and remain seated so far. But without you, none of this would be possible. I also want to thank the library for letting us make this our room, our home for the week, and to Fatima Davis and her team for helping us with all things tech and helping us create a video archive of Hess Week 2025. Thank you so much. I am very lucky to work with some great people. And of course, thank you to the Robert L. Hess Fund and to the Hess family for generously funding decades of Hess Weeks, allowing us to continue to honor the memory of former Brooklyn College president, Robert Hess. Welcome, Symone. And allowing us to continue to learn from our Hess scholars, who in the words of the fund, quote, represent the ideal of the educated individual, knowledgeable, thoughtful, inquiring, alive to share purposes and concerns lining all intellectual pursuits. Now, this year, as President Anderson said, we must thank the donors of the Frederick I Civil Liberties and Academic Freedom Lecture. The fund is sponsoring 3 panels during the week that will help us understand the contemporary attacks on civil liberties. And I thank the President for reminding us of the history of attacks on civil liberties. Now, we are very lucky today because we have some amazing people with us who have come to Brooklyn College to introduce Professor Murray to Brooklyn College. And so it is now my honor to introduce Karen M. Tani, the Seaman Family University professor of both the law school and the Department of History at the University of Pennsylvania.
Hi, everyone. I just want to start by saying how thankful I am to be part of this event, honoring a dear colleague who, at mid-career, has already left a bigger mark on the realm of ideas than most scholars do in a lifetime. I will focus these remarks on, I think, 2 of Professor Murray's most significant intellectual and academic contributions. One is her incisive, prescient research on the legal regulation of abortion, which she has used as a springboard to make bigger claims about democracy, Supreme Court decision-making, and state power. The second is the way that through her leadership and example, she has reshaped the academy itself. I'll start maybe for fans of Strict Scrutiny out there, her podcast. You probably know that Professor Murray and her co-hosts like to joke about being Cassandras. So this is a reference to the prophetess in Greek mythology who accurately predicted the most important events of her time, but was never believed thanks to the curse of a spiteful god. So to offer just one example, the ladies of Strict Scrutiny warned that Project 2025 really would be the blueprint for an incoming conservative presidential administration at a time when many people refused to credit that idea, and lo and behold, here we are. But with Professor Murray, I think these examples, these Cassandra examples, run even deeper, as you will appreciate if you canvass her many writings. Looking back on some of those writings to prepare for today, I was struck by how consistently clear-eyed she was about the vulnerability of Roe versus Wade. By 2020, she noted the only thing that seemed to be keeping Roe alive was the idea of stare decisis, that is, the principle of adhering to past precedent. Through close readings of Supreme Court cases, she then showed how conservative justices were laying the groundwork for getting around this bedrock principle. In a brilliant Harvard Law Review case comment in 2020, she noted that, in fact, all of the court's encounters with stare decisis, even in non-abortion contexts, were unfolding in the shadow of Roe and teeing up maneuvers for later use in that context. A year later, also in the pages of the Harvard Law Review, Professor Murray documented Justice Thomas's concerted effort to delegitimize the Roe precedent by pointing to the historical nexus of race, abortion, and eugenics, and co-opting arguments about racialized harm. As it turns out, Roe's fall would come through different means. Should I move a little over? Okay. Roe's fall would come through different means. But in that article that I just referenced and elsewhere, Professor Murray spotted a trend, again, Cassandra-like, that is now endemic in our politics, which is reversing the gains of historically subordinated groups via the language of bias and discrimination. Fast forward to 2021, when the court agreed to hear Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, right? We know this is the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. Seeing that there would be a full frontal assault on Roe rather than a stealthy attack, Professor Murray joined colleagues Rita Siegel and Serena Mayeri to write a brilliant erudite amicus brief, right, a friend of the court brief, drawing on post-Roe cases involving sex role stereotypes and pregnancy-based classifications. The brief explained why, today, the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause supplies an additional independent basis, right, independent of the reasoning of Roe versus Wade, for the constitutional right to an abortion. And I would say this was actually decidedly not a Cassandra episode, even though Professor Murray likely knew that the argument wouldn't persuade the Roberts Court. It was more like the generous act of sowing seeds, which might someday generate a different legal future. I would say there is yet one more limit to the Cassandra label, apt as it generally is for her career. Professor Murray's insights, I think they do flow from her natural God-given gifts, but they were also the result of very hard work and a willingness to push beyond her comfort zone. I think this is a hallmark of her career. I've always been impressed, I should say, with the stores of historical knowledge that she has accumulated. I would say rivaling those of scholars who have spent years in PhD programs trying to accumulate that same knowledge. This historical knowledge, I think, undergirds all her work, but is especially apparent in her work on the entangled history of abortion, eugenics, and sterilization, in which she points out that for people who today are sincerely concerned about eugenic racism, as some anti-abortion advocates are, the lessons from history largely point in the direction of state-sponsored reproductive abuses. We should therefore be wary of inviting more state power into this realm. On this same topic of hard work and growth, I've also been impressed by Professor Murray's incredible appetite for new areas of law and her ability to see connections cutting across them, as she did to great effect in her writings on the state's various tools to regulate intimate life. Her earliest writings, as you will hear this week, were at the nexus of criminal law and family law, but as she pursued big questions, she became an expert in constitutional law and in public law more generally. Professor Murray's mastery of constitutional law is a nice segue into what I want to say next, about her influence in the academic community writ large. So by way of background, I think this will be familiar to some in the room. When Professor Murray entered the law teaching market, many candidates were counseled to not bother expressing an interest in constitutional law, because that was considered the terrain of the fanciest people on the market, like the guys who already looked and sounded like law professors, right? They already looked and sounded like they belonged. So people like Professor Murray, people like me, we were supposed to find some other patch of land to claim and hope that like one law faculty would see some potential in our research agenda. So let me tell you what Professor Murray did within just a few years of teaching at UC Berkeley. She got herself in the con law teaching rotation, which at many schools is jealously guarded, and she outshined everyone. At this point, her research was also pushing into the heartland of constitutional law and bringing fresh insights to it. She forced colleagues to consider topics they had sidelined, such as the significance of often overlooked cases on non-marital birth. She also brought, as we have heard, a humanities sensibility to the study of the makers of constitutional law, treating important judges and justices not as objects of worship, as is common in our field, but as humans who are situated in particular contexts and whose views about the Constitution are inseparable from the various lenses through which they view the world. At Berkeley, Professor Murray eventually took over the annual Supreme Court roundup that a very senior male colleague used to do at the end of every term, previewing her panache as a public commentator. In other words, she refused to live inside the boundaries that people tried to impose on her and insisted that she had something valuable to contribute, I think which is now very clear that she did. In the same years that she claimed the space for herself, she also made space for others, which is the point that I want to leave you with. I was Professor Murray's junior colleague at Berkeley, and she played an essential role in my hire. I will say I was a risk by conventional metrics. I was doing interdisciplinary work, as we've heard about. I had never published a standard law review article. I was green in many ways, but Professor Murray, who was on the hiring committee, luckily for me, she saw something in me and she helped others see it too. And once I got to Berkeley, I watched her do this again and again for other candidates, often people from historically underrepresented backgrounds in academia, often people who had creative, original ideas but lacked polish in one dimension or another. And I learned so much from her, which I have paid forward. I learned how to ask the kinds of questions that help colleagues recognize their biases and want to do better. I learned how to help colleagues see potential and value in candidates that they were ready to dismiss out of hand. I also learned a lot about mentorship. For Professor Murray, it was not enough to get someone in the door. She wanted them to thrive. I suspect at this point in her career, Professor Murray has read and commented on thousands of drafts, many of them mine, mooted hundreds of talks, and spent countless hours coaching and counseling junior colleagues. Now, this is the kind of work that I will say barely registers on a CV, but it matters. It matters way more, I think, than citation counts or other conventional measures of influence, even though Professor Murray, of course, has those too. Instead of citations, I sometimes think we should count bodies. We should count the deserving people that we help up the ladder, the people who were at risk of getting overlooked and who turned into great scholars, great teachers, great institutional citizens, and who will themselves make academia richer and more inclusive. By this metric, Professor Murray is the indisputable queen. Long may she reign. Thank you.
Karen, thank you for those remarks, and thank you for bringing up UC Berkeley, my alma mater. It's been 13 years there. And thank you for mentioning her willingness to open the door for people. President Answer talked about how Professor Murray was here in the fall of 2023. Right after, she sent us an email saying, I'd love to invite 12 of your students to come to my con law class. That's the age that she conquered. And by doing that, she helped, as her students told us afterwards, to transform them, to empower them, some of which are here today. And who are going places. Now, it's my next honor to introduce Doug NeJaime, the Urowsky Professor of Law at Yale Law School, and I promised I would try to say the name right, but I told him it was going to sound like Ricky Ricardo. Okay.
Thank you. So I want to start by thanking Professor Alonso for inviting me to be here. I'm thrilled to be introducing Melissa Murray to this community. Melissa is so many things to me. She's a wonderful colleague. She's a supportive and hilarious friend. She's a style icon. Check out her modeling turn for Argent. She's, according to my son, that woman on TV who dad knows. And I was not asked, though, to talk about what an amazing person Melissa is. I have no doubt that if you don't already know that, you'll get to know that from spending time with her. I was asked to talk about Melissa's role as a scholar. And as you heard from Professor Tani, Melissa is one of the nation's most important and influential legal scholars on constitutional law and reproductive rights and justice. And she's also one of the most important and influential legal scholars on marriage and the family. And so first, we should just take that in, that Melissa has significantly shaped more than one major field. And in my remarks, I want to focus on Melissa's influence on family law, which is distinct from, but of course deeply connected to questions of reproductive justice. Melissa's work structures critical and ongoing debates in family law. And at times, Melissa and I have occupied somewhat competing positions in some of these debates, and it's a testament to her intellectual engagement that she consistently approaches my work with an open mind and a generous spirit. And it's a testament to the person that Melissa is, that even when we disagree, we remain not only close friends, but supportive colleagues, and we both always try to make each other's work better. I want to draw out two central and interconnected themes with which Melissa's work has become associated. First, Melissa has been at the forefront of demonstrating the power and legal force of marriage, showing marriage's role in regulating and channeling sexual and family relations, not only inside formal marriage, but also within the space of non-marital relations. Second, and relatedly, Melissa has become the principal citation for the left progressive critique of marriage generally and of some of the arguments for marriage equality specifically. So I'll show these two themes by taking up what in my view are two of Melissa's most important articles written before the Supreme Court opened marriage to same-sex couples nationwide in Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015. So let's start with the wonderfully titled Marriage as Punishment. Melissa's wonderful husband is here. This is not a claim about her personal life. It is a historical and analytical claim. Melissa supplies a riveting account of the crime of seduction. Criminal statutes enacted over the second half of the 19th century prescribed sexual relations with a presumably chaste woman when such relations occurred in light of the man's promise to marry the woman. The innocent woman, the logic goes, submitted to the man's advances based on that marriage promise. Marriage then constituted a defense to the crime of seduction. The man could avoid prosecution by marrying the woman, and as Melissa shows, marriage then also functioned as a punishment. Marriage was essentially the state's tool for punishing illicit sexual relations and legitimating those relations through a state-sanctioned relationship form. Melissa relates this legal history to contemporary understandings of sexuality and marriage, leveraging her historical account of seduction to shed light on the disciplinary nature of marriage today. Seeing marriage in this way allows Melissa to make more legible contemporary critiques of the LGBTQ push for marriage. The left critique of marriage equality may be unfamiliar to some of the younger folks in the room, some of the students, and may be especially startling today as we're living in a world in which all claims of LGBTQ equality seem to be under attack by the right. But for many years, debate raged on the left over the wisdom of marriage as an LGBTQ movement goal. Why? Well, marriage historically was a site of gender subordination. Marriage historically marked non-marital families as deviant. Marriage was an institution through which the government channeled material goods and resources that all families needed and deserved. And marriage could function as a tool of discipline and domestication, limiting our possibilities for more pluralistic, familial, and intimate formations. While LGBTQ claims may have sounded in registers of freedom and autonomy, the history of seduction shows how the state enlists marriage to regulate sexuality. The illicit sex captured by seduction statutes could be managed by the state by channeling it into marriage. The offender would have his sexuality formally cabined by marriage, and the marriage would preserve the woman's good name. And in this sense, marriage didn't constitute an act of liberty, but a space of confinement. So too, Melissa argues, can marriage in contemporary times serve to regulate citizen sexuality. And this insight leads Melissa to be skeptical of a single-minded rush towards same-sex marriage. Instead, she seeks to reclaim the space of non-marital sexuality. For Melissa, instead of leaping from the decriminalization of sodomy to the civil recognition of marriage, advocates and ordinary citizens might have focused on the benefit that could be had in the space for sexual relations that is neither criminalized nor directly regulated by family law. and she fears that this space will evaporate as all sexuality is either prescribed by criminal law or disciplined by marriage. So let's turn from sexual relations to family arrangements. In What's So New About the New Illegitimacy, an article that has deeply influenced my own work, Melissa challenges the progress narrative that typically characterizes the 1960s and 1970s Supreme Court decisions on the rights of non-marital children and unmarried fathers. So some of you may be surprised to learn that for most of our nation's history, children born to unmarried parents had no right to support from their father, and unmarried fathers were not treated as legal parents of their children. And in a series of decisions, the court repudiated that discriminatory system. Melissa shows that the court's embrace of non-marital families was partial. Decisions protecting non-marital family relations, ironically, served to prop up the legal and moral superiority of the marital family. On Melissa's account, non-marital parent-child bonds were protected by the court because, and only to the extent that, they resembled the types of relationships formed within the marital family. For example, the court looked more favorably on families in which the mother and father formed a family with each other and together undertook responsibility for their children. Of course, some of the court's decisions did constitute important steps in the campaign to protect non-marital parent-child bonds. Still, Melissa convincingly argues they did not displace marriage as the model of family formation and instead may have bolstered that model. And once again, Melissa relates these earlier cases and the history that she unearthed to the LGBTQ campaign for marriage equality. And here she focuses specifically on arguments by scholars and advocates that drew on the illegitimacy cases in claiming that the children of same-sex couples are harmed by their parents' exclusion from marriage. For Melissa, these child-centered arguments seem to accept the stigmatization of non-marital families and to distance same-sex couples from those unmarried parents who can but choose not to marry. These so-called illegitimacy as injury arguments, she contends, accept the marital family's privileged position, marginalize non-marital family formation, and consolidate the racial dimensions of both non-marital parenthood and queer identity. As Professor Tani pointed out, Melissa is prescient. So Melissa's arguments and concerns came to the fore when the Supreme Court opened marriage to same-sex couples nationwide in 2015. It did so in an opinion that valorized marriage and denigrated non-marriage. As Melissa argued in the decision's wake, quote, Obergefell builds the case for equal access to marriage on the premise that marriage is the most profound, dignified, and fundamental institution into which individuals may enter. Alternatives to marriage are by comparison undignified, less profound, and less valuable. The rationale for marriage equality rests, perhaps ironically, on the fundamental inequality of other relationships and kinship forms. Melissa focuses on the substantive justifications for recognizing same-sex couples' constitutional right to marry, but as she notes, the rhetoric matches those substantive claims. Consider just two vivid passages in Obergefell. Writing for the 5-justice majority, Justice Kennedy observed that marriage, quote, responds to the universal fear that a lonely person might call out only to find no one there. And he described the hope of gays and lesbians, quote, not to be condemned to live in loneliness. So imagine what must have been going through the minds of the single women on the court at the time, Justices Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Kagan. With a 1-vote majority, they had to sign on to these statements about loneliness. Life outside marriage, the court communicated, is lonely. Those who are unmarried are condemned to live this lonely life. It seems like Melissa was really onto something years earlier. Of course, many of us are now longing for the court of 2015, but that should not immunize even that court's liberal decisions from criticism. Melissa's critique of Obergefell fits within the broader arc of the work that I've tried to chart here and other work in this vein. And across her work on family law, Melissa is concerned primarily with how our legal system incentivizes and privileges marital relations. She does not think it has to be this way. Indeed, she envisions a different world. In her own words, she is, quote, concerned with advancing a project of family and relationship pluralism that respects and values a broader array of relationship and family forms than civil marriage alone. I'm jealous that you all get to spend the coming months with Melissa. I know that you'll enjoy learning from her just as I've enjoyed learning from her, and I'm grateful to be part of this day. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you for letting us learn from you as well. I was kidding with Melissa earlier and told her that this was like that old 1950s show, This Is Your Life. And there's lots of people in your life who want to talk about you. And so with that, it is now my honor to introduce the amazing Symone Townsend, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend.
Went through hell and high water to find those flowers today. So they were going to get their moment. It is my pleasure to be here. I was so honored when I was asked, and I thought this was a surprise. So it was a surprise to me when they put Melissa on the email, and I'm like, well, Lord, now she knows I'm coming. So thank you all for the invitation. It is a privilege to be here at Brooklyn College. This is a place where ideas matter, where justice is not just studied, but where justice is pursued, and where young people are preparing to lead in a world that urgently needs them. I am here to talk today and introduce you all to someone who embodies that pursuit of justice, Professor Melissa Murray, from the vantage point of her public speaking. You know, you all know Melissa. Obviously, she is a podcast co-host. She is a MSNBC legal scholar. You may not know that she is also one of MSNBC's resident royal analysts. We do use her in that capacity. We will get on to that. Hopefully, she'll touch on that while she's here over the months. She knows a lot about the court that is the royals. But she is a brilliant legal scholar. As you know, she's a professor of law at NYU and one of our country's most trusted and courageous voices when it comes to making sense of the law and the times we're living in. Again, you've seen her on television, you've seen her in print, you heard her on the airways and the podcast, and she breaks down the complex legal rulings, unpacking constitutional issues, and doing it all in a way that I think is really important because it's not just accessible, but it is deeply grounded in truth. We are living in what is a very serious moment and precarious times. As we speak, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey is still on the floor of the United States Senate. And he said that he rose to the floor yesterday a little after 7 p.m. because these are not normal times in America. And I would argue that Senator Booker is absolutely correct. Our democracy is being tested. The courts are making decisions that will define not just policy, but people's lives, decisions that determine who gets to vote, who has control over their own body, and who is protected under the law and who is left behind. The current president of the United States is targeting people in the legal profession. He's attacking lawyers, law firms, legal scholars, simply because they've either taken on cases he doesn't like, dared to hire people he can't stand, or represent individuals or causes that he disagrees with. And I would argue that it is not just rhetoric. This is an attempt to intimidate. I think this is dangerous. It's an attempt to silence, to bend the legal system to his will. And it's for that reason that the presence of voices like Melissa's, voices that are not just smart or voices that are not just principled, but are fearless, are more critical in this moment. In this climate, clarity is very rare, okay? The truth is often distorted, and plain-spoken honesty delivered with moral clarity and intellectual rigor, that is a radical act. That is Melissa Murray. That's why her voice is so vital. Melissa just doesn't interpret the law. She speaks with truth about what the law means. She brings the legal conversation out of the ivory tower and onto people's screens. Heck, she brings it into my inbox. Some days I'm like, what is going on? Melissa can explain it to me in a way that I can understand. She brings it into people's living rooms, where I think that matters the most. She speaks in a way that honors both the complexity of the issues, but also the intelligence of the audience. I had the honor of working alongside Melissa on a special about the power and role of Black women leading up to the 2024 election. And I'll tell you this, when Melissa speaks, people listen. They pay attention. I didn't know Melissa as well. I knew her from work, obviously. And when it came time to do this special, folks asked, who would you want to do it with? And I said, oh, Melissa Murray. They said, do you know Melissa Murray? I said, I know Melissa Murray from work. And I know Melissa Murray is smart, and I think Melissa will teach me something. And I learned a lot from Melissa in doing that special. Chief among them, she is not a millennial. It was a shocker for me, let me tell you. I asked for ID. But I also grew a deeper understanding of the ways in which the political and the legal coincide with the cultural. And the way in which when we talk about meeting people where they are, Melissa and I literally went to a nail shop and had an intergenerational conversation with some young black women about their perspectives in this election. And I think we walked away a little scared of what is to come, but also with a deeper understanding of just how people are thinking about and living through this moment. To that special, Melissa brought a sense of urgency. She brought a sense of humanity and a sense of moral purpose. I think she does that with every single word that she speaks, frankly. So it is with great admiration and gratitude that I am here today. She's also extremely fabulous. And I am just excited for today, for the months to come. And it's my pleasure to just give a little introduction to my good sister, friend, cousin, Melissa Murray.
Okay. Now, there is somebody else who wanted to make sure to be here today, but she's a little busy in Washington, D.C. So she couldn't be here in person, but as I often hear you say, we're going to roll the tape when we find her. Thank you, Justice Sotomayor, for your service and for those amazing words. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Brooklyn College's Hess Scholar-in-Residence for 2024-25, Professor Melissa Murray.
First of all, I should say that I am the mother of teenagers, so it is very rare to be celebrated. So I'm so overwhelmed. This is truly a this is your life moment, but it's also weird and jarring, and I mean, and wow, what a surprise! Just and truly. So let me start first by saying thank you. Thank you to the Hess family for endowing this Scholar-in-Residence program, which has brought so many wonderful people to the Brooklyn College campus. Thank you to Gaston Alonso and Kiana Benjamin and the terrific staff at the Wolf Institute for all of the hard work that they've done over the years for this program, and in particular this week. Thank you to Kelly Karst, who has compiled and curated an amazing retrospective without any of my input, because honestly, I found the whole idea of creating a museum retrospective of my life a little bit like buying a life insurance policy. Like, it was just too much. This was too much. So thank you, Kelly, for doing that. Michelle Anderson, President Anderson, I've known you for 25 years. Thank you for your leadership of this venerable institution in such tough times. We all know how difficult it is right now for academia, and I appreciate how often and frequently you stand on business. Thank you. Dean Napoli, thank you for having me here this week and for that wonderful discussion and meditation on the importance of the humanities for law and of law to the humanities. I feel like I live that in my life, and I'm so grateful that it is part of the ethos here as well. Doug and Karen, thank you for being my friends and my colleagues for so many years. You are slightly junior to me. I think I have played a role, at least in some point, for you being hired at some school, whether it's Berkeley or UCLA or whatnot, but I cannot express how proud I am of the careers that you've had, the work that you've done, the role that you've played in bringing on other students and ushering other people into our professional community. It is truly a joy to watch the work that you do and how well you do it. You are truly stars in your field, and I'm just glad to be in your firmament. Thank you. Symone, I just want to say, if you've been following the news recently, there's been a lot of upheaval in cable news. And I'll just say it's not usually the case that people who occupy a vaunted position in this world are willing to bring along other people. Not everyone does it. I will say Symone Sanders Townsend has been absolutely phenomenal in that she's never been turfy, which is to say she's never guarded her turf jealously. She has always shared it willingly and generously with other people. And I am so grateful for you picking me, for that special, for having the chance to work with you. I learned so much from you. I learned how to do Instagram. That was huge. I didn't know how. She's like, no, girl, you have to repost this. These are your stories. No, now you're sending your password to people. Don't do that. Because she's right. I am not a millennial, and she was shocked. Michael Steele was also shocked when he learned as well. But I am very definitely Gen X, and I'm just grateful for the time that we've spent together. Getting to know you is one of the underappreciated pleasures of being able to work with the folks at MSNBC. I want to also thank Justice Sotomayor. She's not just someone for whom I work. She's basically my mother-in-law. She has, for so many people, played the role of mentor and friend and mother, and she's certainly been all of those things to me. And given all of the things that she has going on, like she is right now in oral arguments, the fact that she took the time to do this just touches my heart so profoundly, so thank you. And then finally, let me just say something, since my work has been so much about marriage and the family. Let me take the time to speak to my husband, who is here. And he's got his laptop. Yeah, that's him. I said recently that the thing that I'm most proud of in my career is the fact that my husband and I have, I think, modeled for our children an egalitarian marriage. And I meant that sincerely, because I don't think either of us grew up with scripts for what an egalitarian marriage might look like. I think we both grew up in families where our fathers' careers took precedence, and that's not the way it's been for us. Sometimes my career has taken precedence, and we've moved across the country for me and back. Sometimes his career has taken precedence, and I have put my things on the side burner in order to advance him. I think it's so important that we have shown both of our children, our daughter and our son, that this is possible, it is difficult, it is complicated, and we are generally operating without a net, but that this is something that can be done and should be done because everybody's professional life can be valuable and make a contribution. You just need the support system around you to do it. So I met my husband on the first day of law school back in 1999, which means that I have now known him for more than half my life. And I can honestly say that it has been the better half because he is my better half. Thank you. So if you read the Wikipedia page about me, it says that I am from Florida. I am from Florida. I was raised in Florida, but I want to be very clear, I am not of Florida because I am a daughter of Brooklyn. I was born at Methodist Hospital in Park Slope, and I spent the first 5 years of my life just 5 minutes from this campus in an apartment on Ocean Avenue in a Jamaican community. I was born to 2 Jamaican immigrants, so this is my home, and I've always felt that whenever people ask, where are you from? Like, I am from Brooklyn. I am from the borough of Queens. I was told in these remarks I should sort of speak to the current moment, so I just want to do that by maybe trying to meld together 2 observations or vignettes. So very recently, a former student of mine came back to NYU. She's a student from Berkeley. And she shared with me photographs from her wedding. And I was looking through the photographs and, lovely pictures of the bride, the groom. But one of the things that struck me was that when there were pictures of her family and friends from her early childhood, they were relatively homogenous. It was only when you saw the pictures of her with her college friends, her law school friends, her work friends, that the pictures sort of popped with diversity. And I say that just to note that through no fault of our own, we live incredibly segregated lives. We live in communities that, for whatever reason, are residentially segregated. We socialize with people who are like us. Our families are like us. It's really when we go to college or to graduate school or enter the working world that we meet people who are not like us, that don't look like us, that don't have experiences like ours. It's really where we are confronted with lives that are different from our own. And it is likely because work and school and university offers us those opportunities to have that kind of cultural exchange with other people, to learn from them, to see their experiences, and to understand how they differ from our own, that the university and the workplace and DEI in those spaces is absolutely under assault right now. Because they understand that when we understand each other, barriers come down, that we work better together, that we don't fear each other, and that we are able to come together in community. And that's a risk for those who would rather cow us into submission in some way. The university is particularly vulnerable to those who fear the prospect of knowledge exchange, cultural exchange, because the university is, in fact, a place where those things are supposed to happen and do happen every day. Which brings me to my second vignette. Last week, I had some time off in the afternoon. I decided I would go to the Museum of the City of New York to see the exhibit on Shirley Chisholm. I've always loved Shirley Chisholm, in part because I felt a kind of connection to her. She, too, was the daughter of Caribbean immigrants and was raised here in the United States, first person in her family to live in the United States. And she went on to do amazing things, including representing for the first time the congressional district that was created in the wake of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to reflect Brooklyn, and indeed the area of Brooklyn in which this college is sited. When I went through that exhibit, one of the things I noticed, I don't even know if I knew this beforehand, but Shirley Chisholm is a graduate of Brooklyn College. Yes. It was here in this community and in this college where she learned to be unbought and unbossed. And that's the power of college. the power of colleges like Brooklyn College. In this community that is still in large part immigrants, Brooklyn College is a place where dreams are born and given flight, where individuals can come from other places, knowing that their children will one day be the first to do something, whether it is the first Black woman to be a member of Congress or the first Black woman to serve as the interim dean of a public university in California. This is where those dreams are born and where they are given flight. And that is why places like Brooklyn College are so dangerous right now, and why they are threatened and vulnerable. And to be sure, the assault on colleges right now has been isolated on colleges I think would understand themselves to be quote unquote elite. And it's not a surprise that they would start there. Because if you are one of these so-called elite institutions, one of the things that have made you elite over time is that you've worked to make yourself exclusive. You've actually made it part of your ethos to keep people out. And that means that when the assaults come, there's no one to stand with you. You haven't made any friends because you've been so focused on being exclusive. But even though they will start there, it will not end there. And it will eventually come around to all colleges and universities, including this one. And this is a university that is built on the ethos of not exclusivity, but inclusivity, because it understands that every single student who goes here has the promise to be amazing. And so if you believe in that ethos as well, this is the time to stand on business, to stand with the universities, all of them, to stand with our students, with our faculty, stand for academic freedom, stand for writing things that people may not want to hear, but that they should. Not because we want to indoctrinate them, but because we genuinely care about the exchange of ideas, because we generally and genuinely care about the production of knowledge and the possibility of a future in which all ideas matter. And so thank you for bringing me back home to Brooklyn College to be the Hess Scholar-in-Residence for this week. It is my pleasure and my honor to stand with you for this week as we exchange ideas and learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Murray. We are ready for this week. We are ready to learn from you. Thank you for reminding us of the power of higher education. And thank you for everyone who joined us to welcome Professor Murray to our college. We're going to break for lunch, but we will see you here in this room at 2:15 for our first panel on abortion and democracy. And we have a real rock star lineup of speakers. Professor Murray will be joined by Alexis McGill-Johnson, the President and CEO of Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Barbara Smith, Hess Scholar 2023, and Naomi Brain, Professor of Sociology at Brooklyn College. So we'll see you at 2:15. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us.